That's a good one.
All right, we are live on YouTube. Congratulations, YouTube. And we are now live on Zoom. I am going to try to figure out who is joining. Kent, first in the house. Kent, to be in the room that fast, I believe Kent has been in the waiting room since about 7:30 Central Time or 7:30 Eastern Time. We've got Gene Golden, Jim Brubaker in the house, Leah Dunn in the house. Thank you all so much for joining. Debbie Long, I hope you are feeling fantastic and wine can soon be a part of your diet. Eric and Lauren Klein, oh my goodness, you guys are awesome. Jan Kiefer, fantastic. Ellie Sanford Moore, Diane Yetter, David Vance, known as Abe Froman, the Sausage King. For those of you, a little side note, David was an extra in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, or want to be extra. No, that's all good. I think Mark Shalinor, outstanding. Good to be here. Good to be with you. Very happy everyone's joining us for a Friday night holiday weekend. Not certain any religious affiliations, but be good out there. Take care, drink great wine, and reminisce about the episode that we're going to have this evening. Episode 52, 5-2. And interesting. Oh, there's Jeff and Jane Greasy. I thought we were going to have to stop.
Right.
Pause. Jeff and Jane Greasy. I have to say it slower because I just get excited every single time. They've been here all 52 weeks in a row. 52 weeks in a row. Doug Rutherford, how are you doing, sir? Good to see you. I'm glad everybody's here. We have a very, very exciting show tonight. I am going to break precedent and follow in the footsteps of some great speakers, teachers, Tim Ferriss, Malcolm Gladwell, Stephen Covey, Bob Burr, Jim Rohn, all of the greats tell you if you want to succeed in life, ask for help from friends. So we're among friends, so I'm going to ask for some help. For those of you not in Wine Club, join Wine Club. We would love for you to be in the Wine Club, and we'd love for you to bring one other person because we're trying to build the greatest wine club in America. And we can do that with you. So we want to do it together because we get to feature fantastic wines from great wineries, just a quarterly wine club. It is a ton of fun. And tonight we are going to talk about a person and a process and some geeky stuff because we've got a very, very educated audience. It gives me absolute, just unbridled joy to introduce you to one of our favorite guests, one of our favorite people who actually gave me this shirt, mailed it. Zoetic. We can be bought, we can be bribed, swag works. And ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, the Pinot passionate, I don't even know how to describe you, Kim, but I'm just going to let everybody know. Kim Vance from Zoetic Wines is with us in the house tonight. Kim, cheers and welcome.
Woo! You can't see it. There it is. Cheers. It's floating it's in the vineyard. Yeah. Hi.
We would play music, but then YouTube would send us another letter.
Can't do it.
Can't do it. So we are also going to give you the option if you would like to turn on your cameras. So you go ahead and Denise is going to allow that to happen. That way it's a little bit more intimate. If you don't want to turn on your cameras, I completely understand. I didn't want to turn mine on, but that did not go over well. So entirely up to you. But tonight, in kind of that continuing education series, we're going to talk about something that we refer to as clones, because that's what they're called. Julie Fogarty, I missed you. Mwah. Hola. That's the extent of my French. Let's talk clones. Okay, so now Kim, let's get into Kim's story first, then we'll talk a little bit about clones. Pinot Noir maker, not making a Cabernet, not making a Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. Why Pinot Noir?
Oh, it's always been my favorite. So I think some of y'all have heard my story before, but I'll kind of give you a little bit more background. So I'm from Houston, Texas, New Jersey born, but moved to Texas as soon as I could. And when we were living in Texas, I was kind of tired of my day job, and my husband David and I were traveling out to California all the time, getting more and more interested in wine, ultimately getting more and more interested in the winemaking process, and then ultimately moved out to California to kind of start this little dream of mine, a little side project. but I wasn't born into it. Obviously I didn't have a family that had a vineyard in California, and we didn't have a vineyard in Houston either, because that's not the thing. It was just something that I kind of bungled into in Houston. I was working with a guy who was the primary wine buyer at Specs, and I was helping him with doing some educational classes. And so I was learning more about wine from him. Then we came out to California for vacations. But Pinot was always one that I gravitated to. I love all wine, don't get me wrong, but when I started to realize what I wanted to make, I said, you know what, Pinot is what I want. If I screw it up, I'm going to be happy to drink the fruits of my labor, no pun intended, and just be happy with it. So that was why I always just kind of stuck with Pinot and went from there.
Now, when you say you've always been in love with Pinot, what I've found over the years is it's usually not a person's first love, and it requires some education, some learning, some experimentation. Did you have any wine ahead of time that you were like, and you wanted to just try, and then you stumbled upon Pinot and fell in love? Or did you first have Pinot and say, wow, this is impressive?
Well, I think like most people, the first wine that I ever had was like a white wine, right? Not a lot of people start out with the red wines because they're like, oh, it's too tannic, it's too dry, or whatever they want to describe it as. But then, like I said, I was working with an extremely well-educated buyer at Specs who had traveled the world purchasing purchasing wine for Specs. And so I was able to try a huge variety of wines, some that I had never even heard of. So that really opened up my eyes to what my options were when I wanted to look at what I was going to produce. Right. So it really gave me a nice introduction to the world of wine, if you will.
I like it. Eric and Laura, that is a wonderful third party to bring to the tasting. I'm humbled. I absolutely want to see the binky go into the wine glass and then right in the child's mouth. It's just something I want to see. I read a book earlier this week. They do it in Italy all the time. Olive oil, wine, right in the mouth. That's how Mr. Antinori started. 23 generations later, that is exactly what they do in Italy. So we can make it part of our.
I think that might get her through her little fever illness she's got going on today. So maybe that'll have to be our bedtime routine tonight.
It's my routine. It's not a bad routine.
No, family show. Didn't you say family show?
I did say it was a family show. My apologies. Well, it's funny, Kim, because we had an educational show several weeks back on Burgundy, and obviously Burgundy is the land of Pinot Noir. So have you studied kind of Burgundy to determine what you want to make and what you kind of want to craft as it relates to Pinot Noir?
Hi, team. Hi, the rest of the family back there. I haven't traveled to France. Sadly, I want to go. I haven't really focused on that aspect of Pinot Noir. I've really focused on what I really like is the California Pinot. I went into a story earlier with you that I'm happy to share again, is when we were first looking at moving to California and producing wine, and specifically Pinot, I had a friend tell me, you need to go to Oregon. You need to try Oregon Pinots. You're going to love them. You may want to move to Oregon, or you may want to make Pinot from Oregon. And that's like, okay, well, based on my experience, I've not really enjoyed, not that they're bad, not my style. And I just wasn't really a fan of them. But when we moved to California, we took a trip shortly thereafter up to Oregon, and we did Pinot tastings for me specifically, but we tried other things. But I really wanted to know. All
up in Willamette, Dundee Hills, or just all over?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. All up and down Willamette. Also produces great Pinot, but we're going through every place trying Pinot Noir, and I just wasn't a fan. And again, not that there's anything wrong with it, just not my style. As you hopefully all, I think, on this call have my wine, or have at least tried our wines. They're dark, they're big, they're bold, they're a big California Pinot, right? And that's just kind of my style. I say that it's the Pinot for cab lovers, right? You don't get that in Oregon. Oregon doesn't get the heat that we do in, especially Northern California, Russian River area, or even Central Coast. So you can't get the deep, dark colors that you can from Oregon that you do in California.
How many Pinot Noirs do you think you tried over the days that you were in Oregon researching?
Well, so we have a running joke about Kim's marathon days of wine tasting and how many different wineries I can go to in a day. And I think the max we hit was 15. So that's not counting wines at each location. That's 15 different wineries. So I've done a lot of tasting in my day.
I am
not driving.
I'm underachiever.
Not driving myself, just, hitting up a lot of different things, testing, tasting, all the fun stuff.
Okay, so you're in Oregon, you're trying to find the perfect Pinot Noir because you want to make Pinot Noir, and you're in Willamette and you're hitting, 10 to 15 wineries a day, and you stumble upon a winery or you find one that resonates. Okay, tell me that story.
Yeah, so we ended up going to Soder Wineries, and I've been a fan of theirs. I know their wines well, and so we bungle into Soder, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to try their wines. And so, typical me, I'm like, what do you have in the Pinot family? What's open? And so they poured me a couple Pinots. The first one was fine, liked it. Second one, I was like, whoa, that's what I like. That's what I'm looking for. That's the exact style I like. It's big, it's bold. It has a lot of flavor, a lot of characteristics. That's one of the wines that you can sit and sip. And I said, I want to know more about this wine. Where did you get it? Where's the fruit from? Tell me about how you processed it. And they said, oh, this one actually came from our vineyard in California in the Russian River. And I'm like, done. I didn't need to do any more. I'm like, I'm good. I'm fine. That's exactly what I needed to know.
So, and for those of you that don't know the name Tony Soder, but if you'd happen to know the winery in Caneros called Etude, Tony was the founder of Etude. And he is a very, very gracious, kind gentleman, and now making wine and crafting beautiful wines up in Willamette after quite an extensive career in the Caneros region and Napa and Sonoma. Hello, Mannings. Cheers to you. Glad to see everyone's healthy in the Manning household. Lise Asimont is on. We are going to talk to Lise in a couple of weeks. She really wants to get a crash course to see what she's in for, but also a Pinot Noir diehard. So you're in Oregon. You decide and fall in love with a wine from Soder's vineyard in Oregon that was from fruit in Russian River Valley.
Yep.
And then you decide to go to Russian River Valley and just knock on doors.
Essentially. So this again was shortly right after we moved here with the mindset of we were going to open the winery. We had the plan to make Pinot. So then it was a matter of where am I going to find fruit? And so to kind of bring us into the clone discussion, when I was in Houston before moving out to California, I worked harvest. I came out to California to get educated on the production process 3 different years. So 2008, 9, and 10. In 2008, my first harvest, I worked with a guy in the city who actually sourced fruit from 7 different vineyards and did actually bring them in their bins, like what's behind Martin, but clonal designate, right? So you had your own clone, 777, 115, Pommard, whatever the clone was from the vineyard. It came in bins like that, and then we processed it. And most wineries will basically process them together. The flavors meld, you produce your wine accordingly. So, but what I was able to do is I was able to taste the fruit in cluster as it was coming from the vineyard and taste the differences of the fruit. And then kind of really start to understand, okay, this is what this clone tastes like. These are the different flavor characteristics from it. This is the shape that's different. This is, the acidity and et cetera, right? And so that's kind of where I first started learning about clones and the differences between them, even though it's all Pinot Noir, just how different they can be.
Well, and it's fascinating. Clonal selection is crazy complex. We talked earlier, Kim and I, in kind of prepping for this about epigenetics. It has to do with clones. And what many of you may not know until you read the Cellar Angels newsletter is that there's actually over 1,000 different clones of Pinot Noir. And that blew me away because I thought there was about 50. So I was off by well over 950. And I can't imagine trying to select a clone. So how do you, it's one aspect, and share with me the analogy that you use with apples, because I think it's a fairly apt analogy with regards to when you guys go tasting and people will say, well, this is Pinot Noir clone 767, 119, 71. This is what they're talking about. So go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, sure. And if you saw the picture that came out on the email with David and I actually eating grape clusters straight like you would an apple, That's exactly what we did. And all of the bins behind Martin, I would literally go in there and just take a whole cluster and just eat it. And it's the best experience ever if you get the opportunity, but that's how you get to taste the different flavors that come out of the clusters and how the different flavors present themselves, the textures, etc. But the apple example I like to use when I'm describing clones because I think it resonates with most people because we all eat apples. But an apple is an apple is an apple, right? But the difference is the flavors, the colors, the textures, right? Some can be super crisp, some can be kind of mealy, some can be tart. And so that's very similar to like, at least how I like to describe clones, because it's all still an apple, just like these are all still grapes of the Pinot Noir family. They just have different characteristics. So when you're looking for, it won't necessarily come out in your wine. This would be more when you're doing like grape tasting. You'll find that they can be more acidic, which is great because acidity, which is also something that I was looking for, also leads to longevity. A lot of people don't think that Pinot Noir can age. They're like, oh, we need to drink it. It's not going to age like a cab. But a higher acidic, the grape, also good tannin structure will lead to that longer longevity of the wine once it's produced. So that's something else that I was considering when I was looking at what I wanted to use for producing the Pommard. And then when I made the blend of Pommard and 777 or 115, those are all good qualities to have.
All right, I'm going to welcome a couple people that have jumped in. John Lalaganis is in, Gene Golden is in, Janet Caldwell is in, and Brian Jarvis, I see you. Good evening, sir. Many people are asking or are always curious. It's like, well, Kim said that some of the people are drinking the wine. How did they get the wine in advance? And I will show you that right now because it's very simple. That's my Outlook, which I should have closed. So at the Cellar Angels website, when you go to the shop and wine, all wine drop-down category, it will bring you to the marketplace. The marketplace is an ever-evolving, rotating selection of wines that we curate exclusively from Napa and Sonoma. So those are the areas that we focus on at Cellar Angels. And you can see, first you see the sip kit. The sip kit will always be in the upper left-hand corner. And this will have wines that will encompass the next 4, 5, or 6 Fridays in a row. So you buy one sip kit, you will get it sent to you, and you will be set for the next 4 or 5 or 6 Fridays. Tonight, we're tasting a pair of wines, and we're doing this because we want to compare and contrast clones. And so this is the 2016 Pinot Noir and also the 2016 100% Pommard clone. So you'll see other wines on the website. You can actually sort this to red, white, rosé, different regions, different varietals, the wine club kit, apply your own filter and filter that way. It's very easy. But this is where folks are getting their wines in advance of the sips. So it's a good way to taste along with the winemaker. And speaking of the winemaker, Kim, when did you found Zoetic?
Oh, I opened Zoetic Wines in 2012.
2012. So favorite clonal selections that you now, I mean, you mentioned that you worked at Harvest. Did you mention where you worked at Harvest?
I did not.
Are you allowed to?
Probably. So it's a really good friend of mine. So his name's Andrew Vingello. It's AP Vin was the name of his winery. He was actually in San Francisco, which is kind of unheard of. Most people, when I tell them that I worked at a winery in the city, they're like, well, there's no winery in the city. Where do you grow the grapes? And I'm like, okay. So then you get into the whole thing about how grapes are not actually grown at the winery and you source the fruit. So we ended up sourcing fruit, and that's the one I was telling you that he basically sourced from, I think it was like 7 different vineyards all around California. So all the way up from Annapolis, all the way down to San Luis Obispo, where I sourced our 2016.
And then when you were crafting and got the opportunity to buy your first fruit, where did you buy it from?
So the first fruit I purchased was Russian River Valley, specifically from the Hop Kiln Vineyard. So if anybody's been to the Russian River Valley in Healdsburg, specifically just out West Side Road, about I don't know, I think it's like 5 miles maybe, just outside of Healdsburg is the Hop Kiln Vineyard, no longer known as Hop Kiln. They were taken over in 2015, but that's where I ended up getting the fruit from, because again, Pinot was fantastic. Russian River Valley is where it's grown, not best, but in a very good way. And so I was really happy to get it from there.
So now that since Hop Kiln got taken over, then we know that we're allowed to say Hop Kiln. So that's good.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if we're not, send all letters to kim.vance@Zoetic. We'll be fine.
Yep.
All right. It actually, Hop Kiln is a pretty special place. And like you said, it's right off of West Side Road. It's for years has been kind of a landmark because of the kilns. And so it was kind of fun to drive by that. And what was special about why you wanted to source some of their fruit?
So we're very small. You would consider us micro boutique. And so from our perspective, the way to get your hands on a small amount of fruit, like you mentioned earlier, is pretty much going door to door. So when I set out, I did have a lot of connections. I know I met a lot of winemakers over the 3 years that I was working harvest. I worked with a lot of different people. So I started using my connections, making phone calls. And I ended up just calling the people at Hop Kiln. And I said, hey, look, I'm a new winemaker. I need to get my hands on some Pinot. I really only want a ton. I know it's a lot of work. Not everybody, wants to go through the effort of harvesting and process, or being able to get a ton only to a winery. And these guys were amazing. They said, you know what, sure, we'll sell you a ton, and which is literally 2 of the bins behind Martin. And if you think about it, that's not that much in the grand scheme of winemaking. Most wineries they can process 25 tons of anything, any one varietal, right? And so it's not unheard of to get that large quantity. But for me, to call a place and say, I want one, most people would hang up on me. They're like, yeah, we can't help you. Sorry, it's not worth our time. So when I found out, not only could I get Hop Kiln in the Russian River Valley, I could get Pinot Noir, but then they took it a step further and they said, do you have a preference on your clones? I was floored. I was like, wait a minute, you're going to let me not only pick, let me have fruit from you, but you're going to let me pick the clone that I want. And they're like, sure, what do you want? And so I told them, I was like, Pommard and 777, because based on my experience from the previous harvest that I'd worked, which were with 3 primary Pinot producers, mind you, I learned a lot about the clones, and I knew those were the ones that I gravitated to. So I was happy.
Literally just another absolute fantastic example of the kindness of wine country that we talk about. Not only did they sell you in their eyes, in their production capacity, a microscopic amount of grapes, right, of tonnage, they also gave you clonal selection and asked you what clones you wanted. I mean, just really crazy. Actually, a good point for our first poll question. So for those of you that are new to Cellar Angels, we will probably get your email address because you have to ante up $100 for the poll questions. And just teasing. Look at Diane Yetter, our tax specialist, going, Martin.
She's like, hang up.
She's like, you're treading dangerously close to the law there. That's not good. All right. So poll question number 1 is going to be shared with you in a second. Kim is so passionate about Pinot Noir clones that she has the leaf of the 777 clone tattooed on her left forearm.
And put my arms down.
Put your arms down.
I did.
Oh, you know what? They're panelists. So
Wait, I have to give permission this moment.
Let me see if, could you give all of our gracious panelists permission to vote, please? Week 52, the technology challenges are absolutely a blast. Can someone talk to me in my ear, please?
I can't, it's too late.
All right, vote in the chat.
Oh, there you go. Good call. Martin, on the fly. Good job.
Jeff, it's a family show.
The sad thing is some of these people have met me, so they're like, yeah, I know. Like Julie's like, yeah.
You can't give hints.
Sorry, I didn't. Sorry, I did.
All right. I am impressed by this audience. So far, everyone has gotten it correct. So she does not have a clone tattooed on her arm. I mean, you would have to be so amazingly passionate about, hey, that's going to be a poll question in a couple weeks, young lady. So winemaker Lise does in fact have a Pinot Noir clone tattooed on her forearm. That shows you, I mean, we've talked about this in the past about how crazy Pinot Noir people are, and with reason, because it is soul altering juice.
I'm gonna have to totally do that. I'm totally gonna have to do that.
Hey Kim, I have a really great tattoo artist in Healdsburg, and he did it. And I'm really strict with ampelography, so it's actually it's physiologically correct, and it's 667.
That is awesome.
Yeah,
I love it. I might actually have to do that. I've been wanting to get a tattoo for years, so that's brilliant.
Pretty impressive. 100%. That might be the first time that our entire audience was correct. But that was, I think you can all agree, a softball question. I mean, you all had a 50-50 shot. So that was pretty impressive. So I actually do want to show, I mean, if you want to talk for a second, Kim, about there's organizations in the United States and France that basically recognize that are the governing bodies of clones.
Yeah.
And of course, everything always comes back to Davis.
Yeah. And thank you, Larry, for teeing that up perfectly. That was nicely done. Perfect timing.
Oh, wow. And Larry Rowe, winemaker from Grayscale, also on. Happy Friday, Larry. That's hysterical because I have a screenshot of the database, and Larry is just the perfect prompt.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me about the UC Davis program.
Yeah. So, and I think when we were talking the other night, Martin, you probably summed it up best, because I think we all know what the Dewey Decimal System is, at least some of us of my age range and probably older, but so Davis uses this thing called the Foundational Plant Service, which is FPS. But essentially what they do is that's how they categorize, and that's the link that Larry added here. They categorize by number clones. So, and then what makes it even more complicated, because you have to be complicated in wine, is UC Davis will have their own number, but that translates to a different number. So when I talk about a name or number for that matter, but when I talk about Pommard, that equates to UCD 56 and 91, right? Because there's different components or different clones of the Pommard clone. So this, yeah, you're looking at the Foundational Plant Services. So when you can go and it's not just Pinot, obviously, every varietal has its own clonal structure and clone numbers, and then corresponding names from there. So based on where the clones come from, Davis actually has their own cloning system, numbering system for them, so that they can all be tracked in basically in their database. But then if you're wanting to purchase some grapevines, you can also go to Davis and say, hey, I want to buy UCD 65 or whatever you want based on their system, and purchase that.
I mean, it's kind of crazy. And Jan Kiefer, you will have to educate Scotland, who's not on this week, on what the Dewey Decimal System is. It has to do with the library, which is a building that we used to go as children to get books. They now have books in their phones. But so the FPS.
That's why I prefaced it with, like, some people might not know about the Dewey Decimal System, but yeah.
Well, it's interesting when you can go to this website, and this is basically the categorization of every clone in the United States is here at UC Davis. And when you list the varieties that they have, you can begin to see thousands and thousands of grapes. And so when we get down to the Pinot Noir section, these are everything that they have categorized. You can click on Pinot Noir, and it will show you all the different types of Pinot Noir, and it will show you in a second. There's some latency. And also, there's quite a few synonyms for Pinot Noir. Remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Spot Burgunder. That is obviously German. So you can see all the different types of synonyms. You can see the different pictures of the clusters, but here's where you get some really cool things from a geek standpoint of the different types of Pinot Noir clones and what they're called, where they came from. Switzerland, by the way, big role in Pinot Noir. Not many people knew that. It is not neutral. Switzerland, big role in Pinot Noir. But also as you start getting up, the Martini Vineyard in Carneros. This is for Pinot Noir 15. It's fascinating when you can think about all these different elements that if you want to buy some of these clones, you can. And if we get down to Kim's favorite clones, this is, when people do this professionally, it's riveting during PowerPoint presentations, I know. You can start seeing the French comparisons. So France also has their own database and category system for their clones. But here's the 871, Carneros region of Napa, Pinot Noir clone 55, Pinot Noir clone 66. People will buy these things like chefs picking a certain ingredient or a certain type of mushroom for a dish, shiitake, bell, portobello. I mean, it's amazing how you can get very, very technical and geeky. Clone 671 is the Byron clone from Mondavi. I mean, it's just amazing. Kim's clones are very specific to what she wants. Clone 70.1 is 338 from Dijon, France. And OSU, Oregon State, also has a huge impact in the categorization of these clones. And finally, Pinot Noir clone 771 is the 777 from Dijon. Talks a little bit about where it came from, when it was categorized. I mean, it really is kind of like a fossil system of categorizing clones as it relates to certain grape types that are being produced. You can actually buy from, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, what even makes it more complicated is not only is it Pinot Noir 71, also known as 777, but it's 71.1, right? I mean, so everything, you have the whole grafting process, which I don't really think we talked about much, but you can create, or even just naturally, different clones can produce themselves, changing the genetic makeup of the rootstock.
Yeah, it's crazy that you want to talk about going down rabbit holes. It's very easy to go down clonal rabbit holes. Yeah. And the question from Diane, do you put the clone on the bottles of wine?
Well, so Pommard is on the label. So the one we have, one of the ones we have tonight is Pommard. It's in quotes. Previously in the first couple of vintages, when I made Pommard specifically, it was known as Block 21. And the rationale on that was Block 21 is the actual part of the vineyard, the block where the Pommard was sourced from. But at the time, and I think it's hopefully been partly me that's starting to help and do a lot more educating, although I don't think I've been doing it enough, on what a clone is. So to put Pommard on a label, I don't know that many people know about it. That could just be me not being, knowing enough about the public out there and their knowledge of clones. But when I first did the clone single vineyard wine, I wasn't finding any other out there. So of all the wineries that I went to, and I was doing a ton of wine tasting, there was only a couple that I found that actually did a clonal specific Pinot Noir. Mary Edwards in Oregon, another one that I actually did have clonal specific. So what I did, anytime I found that, I was buying them up. Like anytime I saw it, I'm like, I'm buying that because I wanted to taste it. I wanted to know how their wine came out if it was specifically one clone. So the main reason I didn't put Pommard on the label at the very beginning was because of that, but our 2016 does have Pommard on it.
That I like. I also want to ask, and Lise, you may also chime in on this answer. I don't even know what the technical term for this is, but the grandmother, mother clone. Is there still pure vines that are not cloned?
So theoretically, the mother vine is genetically completely similar to every single clone. It's just there's different, for most part, but the original clone, it's like the chicken. It's not a chicken and egg. The first clone actually was a clone. Is the best way to put it. Such thing as you're more pure Pinot Noir than the next one. You might be a later phenological expression of that particular genetic signature, but you're still genetically identical. You're still Pinot Noir.
Great question, Doug. I like those questions. Kim was talking a little bit about Pommard, and so I know that's a prompt for the second poll question. And unfortunately, you're going to all have to vote again by the chat. So you're all 100%, you're playing with house money right now for the most part, because you've all essentially Haven't lost a thing. So the Pommard clone comes from what country? Belgium, France, Germany, Croatia, Switzerland. Let's see who was paying attention. There's some back wagering on this between Kim and I, just for the record, and I'm well aware that gambling's illegal, so please don't send us any letters. Ooh. Okay, we're going to give that 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Kim owes me money. Don't say what. You said, would the audience know that Pommard is from France? I'm like, Kim, we have very smart customers. We have very smart supporters. Of course, they're going to know Pommard is from France. Sean Manning even went so far as to say south of France.
Nicely done, Sean.
Impressive. Yes, Pommard is from France. So thank you, Kim, for playing. That was fun. I told you we had a smart audience.
Yeah.
Many of the audiences 2-0. But you just talked a second ago about grafting.
Yeah.
And that is something that I want people to actually learn a little bit about, because Doug asked a great question on, does the original vine exist? And with 1,000 different clones of Pinot Noir, how do these clones propagate? How does a person actually get a clone to be an entire vineyard?
So I'm not an expert on the whole vineyard process because I don't have my own vineyard, but just based on my knowledge and experience and working with different vintners and vineyard managers. So clones in and of themselves can propagate, right? They mutate on their own. The DNA, especially in Pinot Noir, can change and morph over time. And so that is one way. People can interject in the process themselves as well by grafting. And one of the reasons that cloning actually started, or at least for the grapevines, grafting is not strictly only related to grapes, by the way. I mean, you can graft and anything, right? And it's been done for any varietal out there. Like I know 2 doors down, somebody has a lemon lime tree, right? The last time I checked, they weren't supposed to grow together, but by grafting, you take a lemon tree and a lime tree, you graft them together, and there you go. And if you don't know what grafting is, it's essentially taking a mother or rootstock in the terms of grapes. You take it, you basically cut a notch in the side of one, you cut a notch in the side of other, and you basically put them together, and then you basically bandage it, and they grow together. Just like your skin would heal, right? They basically form a new rootstock. And that right there is a clone. That's how people can kind of manipulate the process and make clones. One reason that they started doing this was to help for viruses, right? Phylloxera came on. We wanted to try and find a virus-free grape rootstock. So grafting of rootstocks came into play. So I think that's also another reason why there's so many. You quoted 1,000. I think that's because the Pinot Noir clone in and of itself, or grape in and of itself, will mutate on itself. The DNA will change, but at the same time, the people kind of come in and make it what they want it to be, right? And so I think I was reading the other day that there's like primarily 56 or 60-ish clones that are most common of the Pinot Noir, and that's what people know. So when we look at the whole list from Davis of all the different clones that are out there, are they all being used for making wine? I don't know.
No, and I think it's interesting because we've discussed before, and it bears repeating, just how difficult it is to make wine to then sell it. So your clonal selection has to be something that's going to withstand the vagaries as much as possible that Mother Nature is going to throw. Yeah. It has to be a well-matched clone for the soil type. It has to be is this near a river bottom, or is this on a cool climate? All of the things you can dial in, hopefully with some of the clonal selections that you choose, which is why you don't see 60 clones widely populated or planted in in the Caneros region or Russian River Valley or Edna Valley or the cooler Santa Lucia Highlands areas, because most clones won't do well there, even though they're Pinot Noir. The thing that I found fascinating, which is, and Lise, if you want to chime in on this, I think would be interesting to have additional perspective, and Larry as well, is we talk about America saving Vance's wine industry because of the rootstock that was phylloxera resistant. Extra credit if anybody wants to write in the chat line on where that rootstock originated from in the United States. But one thing that I've read in the past week is that phylloxera is a very aggressive mutating louse. And so it has been mutating for 100 years. And rootstocks have not changed in 100 years. So there is a growing consensus in Burgundy and different Pinot Noir regions around the world that not just Pinot Noir, that, hey, we need to pay attention to this because this louse is actually mutating and getting stronger. And we don't know if the rootstock that we have that is 100 years old is going to be able to survive this sort of mutation ongoing. And I'd be curious if anybody has heard, winemakers, anybody heard anything to that effect?
So I'm the viticulturist by trade, right? And then a winemaker second. The recent issue with phylloxera has been that people believe that there's what we call host adaptability. So not necessarily that the phylloxera and its new biotypes are more aggressive. It's just their life cycle changes in response to climate change that we're seeing. In the United States, especially in California as well, we've been converting our vineyard cultural practices over to less irrigation. So we've been doing deficit irrigation. And unfortunately, sometimes, especially on leaner rootstocks like 10114 or 3309C, we will actually give the vine such little water that it creates a host adaptability fall to phylloxera, even though it's considered resistant genetically. So what's happening is the vine can't actually outgrow the feeding conditions of the biotype of phylloxera that it has. Even the currently identified most aggressive biotype that we have of phylloxera, most strong, well-farmed rootstocks in 100 years will probably still be resistant to it, because it's not about, the resistance isn't from, it's not from shielding, it's just being able to outgrow it and tolerate the feeding. So with that, we're pretty good. But in farming, especially agriculture, but also viticulture, it's not if, it's when the next pest comes along and takes us down. So right now, our greatest source of concern outside of the drought this year is a red blotch, the red blotch associated viruses. So we're dealing with that. That's our new thing. But phylloxera, we've actually done a good job on managing.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kim mentioned hop kiln earlier and how picturesque and pretty it is. And Jeff Greasy had implanted a shock therapy in my collar. And so he wants me to do Google Earth. So let's take a look at where Kim was lucky enough to actually have a very, very famous winery say, what type of clones do you want? So for everybody that is new to the program, wine region to Cellar Angels is only Napa and Sonoma. So this is the area that we focus on. It's the area that we know. It's the area that we visit often pre-COVID. It's the area we will be in July for a week meeting with people. But this is magic to us. This is the landscape of artistry. So when you look at it, you can see every major wine region in the world, and this one is no different, has a maritime influence. So you will see rivers, lakes, estuaries, certainly the Pacific Ocean, certainly the San Pablo Bay, all of them influence the wine region here in Napa and Sonoma. The other beautiful thing about this is that this area is classified as a Mediterranean climate. There's only 2% of the world that is a Mediterranean climate. And that has a major impact on the growing aspect of grapes here. It's really, I mean, when you think about it, 2% of the world has this climate. So Russian River Valley, pretty interesting, very well named. I don't think they had to think hard for a name for this because the Russian River runs right through the valley. Basically north of Healdsburg, Russian River cuts over and heads out to the ocean. But this is really a very, very large valley from a land standpoint. Santa Rosa, probably about dead center into the valley. From hop kiln perspective, this is where Kim was fortunate enough to work. harvest and also source some grapes. And I wanted to stop here as it relates to Hop Kiln because you can see how close it is to the Pacific Ocean. It is just a beautiful area, magical down here. And we'll do a little street walking in a second. But when we get into Hop Kiln, you can see really the topography change. It's beautiful hillsides, as this area of California is. And what I like about it is, I mean, the famous hop kilns right there. So this was always the landmark on West Side Road that you drove by, and it was just, I mean, the history and ancientness of this building and stories it could tell would be fantastic. The vineyard that Kim sourced her fruit on is around this turn up this very steep hill. And it's behind these bushes. You can't see it from the road, but you can kind of see it a little bit from Google Earth. So this section right here is extremely steep. Mm-hmm. And that is exactly where you were able to source your fruit from, which I think is a pretty magical story.
Yeah.
Now, what I think is even crazier cool is the fact that you sourced and planted or had fruit from Edna Valley. Mm-hmm. And the two that we're drinking tonight, this is quite a distance away. But again, close to water. River running right through it. So what drew you here?
Yeah, so if you remember, I mentioned earlier how Hop Kiln sold in 2015. So Our last vintage that we made from the Hop Kiln winery was 2015. And then the new owners, I wasn't able to keep the handshake contract with, so I wasn't able to get the fruit from them. So I was a little devastated at the time because I really enjoyed the relationship. I enjoyed the fruit that I got from there. But again, kind of picking up the phone, started knocking on doors, all of that, again, trying to figure out where am I going to get source fruit. Previously talked about my connection with Alpha Omega and where I sourced, how I was able to secure the Sauvignon Blanc. I reached out to Jean, who was the winemaker at Alpha Omega. And I said, hey, you got any help for me? And he said, what about Edna Valley? Have you ever been down to the Central Coast? And have you ever thought about getting anything from there? And I was like, no, but I'm actually intrigued. And I don't know if you guys know much about the Central Coast AVA. Most people, when they think about Central Coast wines, I don't know that anybody really is drawn to it, but if anybody's ever heard of Cinquenon, which I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on this show, but they source one of the wines that they source from comes from Central Coast Vineyards. And so I was like, you know what? I mean, it's not unheard of to make some fantastic wines out of that region. And I was extremely intrigued. But I think what was more interesting to me is at that time I had made 4 or 5 vintages out of the same vineyard, same clones. I was really familiar with it, like old Pat, right? But then I found out that I could get the same clones from Edna Valley. And I was like, you know what, this is going to be really exciting for me, very interesting for me, because I can take almost like if you take the same product to make a pie even, right? What is that going to turn into? And so I was really excited about that. I was stoked that I could get that. And then very similar to my experience with Hop Kiln, again, when you talk about some of the people in this industry and how welcoming they are to help each other, they're like, what do you want? What clone do you want? How much do you need? And I was floored. And so I was like, look, I've been making Pommard and 777 from the very beginning, and I would love to be able to do this kind of comparison. So that's what I set out to get. We did have one change right through the harvest process. The 777 wasn't forming what I wanted to as far as when it was during the growing season. It wasn't ripening the way I wanted it to. It was really high in acid. I wasn't really happy with it. So I ended up switching and ended up getting the 115. So the second wine we have tonight, which is just labeled as Edna Ranch, actually is Pommard and 115. So any of our previous year vintages, if you've had those, it's Pommard and 777. So I did make a slight change in the second wine that we have tonight, but it was all for the better. I'm extremely happy with the fruit that we got, and I think the wine turned out great.
Yeah, it's funny because we're tasting them side by side, and there is a huge difference, and it's so cool to actually taste the differences from the same vineyard. I also like what you said about you give the same ingredients to chefs, and they're going to make the outcome's going to be different.
Yeah.
I think they might have a television show with that whole premise. I could be mistaken. Television viewing is a luxury. We talked about Tony Soter earlier, and I want to actually have a poll question on Tony Soter. So, and that's a shame that you can't vote, but you can vote in the chat line. Tony Soter, great Pinot Noir producer, Tony Soter, founder of Etude. He was a consultant at Spotswood, Schaefer, Arroyo, and quite a few others. He has said, to be among the great grail seekers of Pinot Noir, you have to be part what? Part genius, part smuggler, part madman, part lucky. Part Kim Vance.
We are all over the place on this one. Nice.
Thank goodness there's only 4 choices. I like it. So, and I think it's an interesting quote from Mr. Soter, who again is one of those salt of the earth people, tremendously kind, part madman, lucky, smuggler, madman, lucky smuggler, part madman. All right, I think the 2 top answers are lucky and madman. And Eric and Lauren in at the buzzer with smuggler. And Eric and Lauren and anybody else that said smuggler is correct. So thank you. The control panel is correcting my English. Thank you. So part smuggler. Tell me a little bit, Kim, why Tony believes you have to be part smuggler if you're going to achieve the holy grail of Pinot Noir
I
production.
think we should let Doug answer this one. Spot on with the suitcase clones.
Yes, Samsonite specials. Lise is correct.
No, Lise too. Nicely done. I didn't see that. Yep, exactly. So I'm going to just tell the romantic story that I've heard. If you're, as we all are, wine lovers, there's a lot of romanticism in the wine industry. So the whole suitcase clone is basically, winemakers that head over to Burgundy or probably anywhere else for that matter, but basically smuggle clippings back from vineyards and bring that back to wherever they are. So our suitcase clones, Calera, I believe is one, Swan, they basically head over to Pizzoni's another one. Sorry, I was just trying to think of his name. Head over to Burgundy, get a clipping from a vineyard, hang it out in their suitcase until they head back, and then graft it and get it going in their own vineyard and then dub it what they want. So we have suitcase clones. So just like I said, we have the Swan Clone. That was the origin of the Swan Clone. The Pizzoni, Gary Pizzoni has his own clone named after himself. And that's how that kind of originated. That's the romantic story that I've heard.
I think that story bears out because some of the people involved in that story have admitted to it as much. I think they were waiting for the statute of limitations to run out.
So I just called some people out, sorry.
Well, no, it's interesting too, because they call them newspaper clones as well, because they would put the clones in wet newspaper and then throw them in their suitcase. And so, what I'm envisioning is it's at night and people are just rummaging through the vineyard with the clipper, jumping a stone wall, or is this just clippings on the ground, or is...
It's probably not a clipping on the ground that's going to be all dried out. So, I mean, it would definitely be something like what's sitting behind you, what's sitting behind me, probably not with leaves on it, but you never know. It could be.
If we only had a viticulturist that could help us.
And maybe.
So I've had to take clones with an FDA permit across the country and internationally. So I've done it with FDA permission. So I'm not a Samsonite special, but the best time to clip is prior to bloom, and after you have at least 6 to 8 nodes. So about this long, and you just take about an 18-inch parcel with at least 2 buds on it. Leave room for desiccation or drying out. I actually have something that looks like I transport organs, but it's just a really nice cooler. Do this much water on the bottom of it, kind of cooler than room temp, throw it in, have your FDA permit on top, slapped on like a sticker. You carry it with you on the plane, you hold it on your lap, and when you get through, you actually get priority. Back in the day, you got priority off boarding to bring it into whatever greenhouse you were going to. So I've done it internationally once and nationally once.
Awesome.
Translation, you do not want to be behind Lise in the TSA line coming back into the country.
I'll mow you down. Yeah.
But I love that story. It's romantic. It's theft. It's trespassing. It has all the elements of a wonderful, bicontinental espionage thriller. And we're stealing clones. I mean, it's amazing. Thank you, Lise, for chiming in on that. I've enjoyed tasting these side by side, Kim.
Yeah.
So
thank you. They're
incredible. Very, very different, which is one of the things that I love about this, because you're right. You have 99% of the same ingredients from the same region, but yet it's a totally different outcome. And that's one of the great things about wine in and of itself, and Pinot Noir. And Doug, I don't think your comment was lost on us, Doug. I like that. You got to watch out for those sniffer dogs. Doug strikes me as someone that might have been, in a vineyard at night once or twice. Doug's in Minnesota. It's daylight out there about 4 months during the winter, and that's about it. And then it's just dark. So you have to figure out a pastime. And the odd foie gras. Yeah, that's a good pastime as well. All right. Was there a favorite for those of you that had both? I might be partial to the Pommard. Or does anybody have any questions for Kim? Does anybody have any tax questions for Diane?
Is the season, Diane?
Except I do not know income tax, so I am not gonna be able to help you with income tax questions.
Neither do we. That requires income.
Yes. No, I just do the sales tax. So
okay.
Although there's a whole lot going on right now with the federal things with the direct-to-consumer stuff. So
don't scare me.
Denise, I don't know if you've been in on the, there were some webinars this week, I think. I couldn't make any of them, but stuff is going on, so.
Lauren likes the Pommard. I've got the Pommard. Kim, what inspired you to leave everything in Texas and get into wine?
Wow.
That was from Kent. Kent, have you been to Houston? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, have you compared Houston to, I don't know, the Bay Area?
Houston got snow this year. Okay, no.
I know, a lot. Yeah. I was really bored. I was brought to Texas by my family. I love Texas. Texas will forever be my home, but I was 6 when we moved there.
No, I know what you want to say.
Tell me. Oh, what is that?
Don't you always say hook 'em horns?
That's not this. This is like hang 10 or something. This, Martin. Come on.
I'm not from Texas.
We have Aggies in the Greasy family.
Oh, that's right. It is a Hawaiian thing. I'm like, I was sitting there going, why does Hawaii and Texas have the same gang sign?
We don't. Where's my Greasy Aggie? There's one of the Greasies is an Aggie, right? I don't see you, so. But I thought one of y'all went to A&M.
Caitlin's an Aggie.
Oh, okay, Caitlin. I knew there was one. Thank you.
All right, so Houston is a great city. I was teasing.
I love it, and I'm dogging it, but it's always going to be my home. Texas, I love Texas. I was looking for a change. I hated my job. I was at the same company for 15 years, which is actually kind of unheard of these days. I mean, most people job hop every 2 to 4 years, and I was there for 15, so I was a little over it. But I love California. I love it. We were traveling out here at least twice a year. It was almost a joke because anytime we told people we were going on vacation, they're like, "Where are you going?" We're like, "California." And they're like, "Again?" So it was one of those things. It's like, we just were meant to be here. And we just love it. And then, the whole wine thing, like I said, when I was learning more about the winemaking process, I wanted to find something else to do as a career. And then Eric and Lauren, I don't like the horns down. Come on. You had to go there. Anyway, sorry. I was looking for something different to do. Being Italian by heritage, it's baking is huge, cooking is huge in my family. So I gave a stint at trying to be a baker. I wanted to be a floral designer. I mean, I was trying to find something else, but wine was always something I was drawn to. And so then, when we were talking about what do we want to do next, California obviously came up, and then the whole winemaking process kind of just fell in our laps from there. And I just had to make it happen. So that's kind of how we landed where we are.
I like the question. The baking thing is new to me. I did not know you wanted to be a baker. To me, that is just way, way too exact.
I love it.
From a
I love
standpoint of
baking.
that. Lise has a question that Kim, do you make any other red wine varietals? And if not, as a Pinot Noir winemaker, what red wine varietal would you make besides Pinot?
Nice. I never did make another red wine. The only other wine that I was producing was Sauvignon Blanc. And I loved the Sauvignon Blanc. I've actually sold out of it. I don't have any more right now. So Pinot Noir is what we have. If I could make another red wine, geez, that's great. I don't want to go down the cab path. I think cab's a little overdone. Again, I love cab, and I'm not knocking any of my friends that make cab. I really would love to see Merlot have a better comeback. I feel like it's kind of getting the shaft, sadly. So maybe Merlot, just to kind of be, I mean, I know it's kind of a generic thing, but I love it. So yeah. I'd go with that one.
The audience screams with appreciation on Merlot, because we had a deep dive on Merlot
Nice.
quite a few weeks back, and we studied Crash Course on the right bank, the Merlot dominant side, of course. And so we visited several famous chateaus by Google Earth. But no, I think you're right. Of course, Merlot has been getting the shaft, and it's such an underappreciated wine in the United States, largely due to Hollywood. But it is such a magical wine. And so I applaud that. So if you ever decide to make that, count us in.
Absolutely, let you know.
Fantastic. You all survived a session on clones. And please forgive our musical licenses with the subject line of "Send in the clones," and apologies to Barbara Streisand, because that one went out between clones to the left of me and clones to the right. Here I am. For anybody of you that remember, what was it? Steelers Wheels from the 70s. Again, Jan, pull that up on Apple Music for Scotland, because he will have never heard of that song. Next week, by the way, on week 53, we are welcoming back John Lalaganis, wine instructor and author. And I'm psyched for this. Chef Wook King is coming back, and we're going to be introduced to we're hiring an intern for the production staff. If anybody wants to come and apply for that, they have a blog called Feeding the Soul. We're also going to be talking about oaked and unoaked Chardonnay, and it is a holiday weekend. So Pinot Noir goes great with everything on the holiday table this week. And you've got some great Pinot Noir in your glasses. I hope you have some in your cellars. Kim Vance, you are outstanding as always. Thank you for spending some of your Friday with us. Cheers to you and David. Thank you both. And everyone else, be good, stay safe, have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for all.